Hello, welcome back to another episode of The Human Side of Learning and Talent Technology. We're back for another great week of discussion around learning topics and trends and what's going on in learning and development across our organization, your organization, and a couple other organizations that we have awesome insight into today, or one very large organization that you've probably heard of. So we have a special guest. My name is Bennett Jensen. We're back with Tiffany Faulkner and Dave Seligson from Blue Water. Dave's joining us again after taking a few weeks off while Chris came back, and now we got Dave again, which is awesome. So welcome back, Dave. Thanks for being with us. And today we also have a very special guest, our first guest from outside of the Blue Water world, which I'm really excited about. And we have our good friend and colleague or client and someone we've known for a while now, Lisa Edstrom, who is the Global HCP Engagement and Compliance Leader at 3M Healthcare. And Lisa, how are you today? And welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Bennett. I'm doing well, thanks, and excited to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely, we're excited too, and looking forward to kind of diving into what's going on at 3M, what's been changing over the last 12 months from a technology and process and just overall learning and development perspective. So thanks so much for being here. So Lisa, before we get started, would you mind kind of telling us a little bit about your role at 3M and what you've been up to over the last year or so?
Yeah, sure. Um, well, a couple years ago, but actually about 2 years ago, I took on a new role within a new organization in the healthcare business group at 3M, focused on global healthcare compliance. Previous to the organization launching, we had really relied on our corporate ethics and compliance organization to help keep us on the straight and narrow and provide education and training, and realized that as our healthcare business began to grow, that we needed a specialized organization really focused on healthcare compliance, and certainly within the context of the big umbrella and 3M's overall ethics and compliance, but also as regulations change and increase, and our global footprint increases, having that specialization was really needed. And so I took on a new role working within that organization, working specifically on compliance with our engagement with external healthcare professionals who we contract with to come in and do focus groups with us or do advisory boards, do podium speeches on our behalf. And certainly a big part of what these KOLs or HCPs do is educate our customers and prospective customers around process improvement, quality improvement in the healthcare business group. So it's been a fun 2 years, a lot of
Mhm.
learning, and a lot of technology implementation and changes.
Great. Yeah, we look forward to kind of diving into that a little bit further. So, Dave, question for you. I know you initially were part of the team working with 3M and kind of building the relationship between Blue Water and 3M. And as our listeners know, we always kind of like to go into a little bit of a fun discussion or banter before we kind of dive into the to the actual fun stuff. So, Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of the building the relationship with 3M, but also specifically about the opportunity we had, and I think you had as well, to take Lisa to one state fair and another state fair that Lisa is really close to. Kind of get us started there
You
if you
bet.
could.
Yeah, that's a good story. We initially engaged to help them upgrade their learning and talent, learning technology. As part of that process, we invited Lisa to come down and do some strategy whiteboarding. And so we had her down at the Blue Water offices, and we worked to coordinate that schedule so that it coincided with our company's annual trip to the Texas State Fair. So it was, it was not coincidental. It was purposeful. We knew that we were signing out and heading down there, and it was a beautiful day that day. And she got to come down to the state fair. And I'd like to say she always talked about how great the state fair is where she is up in Minnesota, but we felt like ours was better. So she got to experience both, and I guess maybe he still has an opinion about which one she thinks is better. Unfortunately, the one thing that Lisa did not do, and she doesn't know I'm about to say this, but she never did invite us to come join her for the state fair in Minnesota. So she didn't reciprocate that. So Lisa,
Well,
which one's better?
actually, I have to say, and I knew this was going to come up, so I went out and did a little research on the internet, and I'm sorry, Dave, but Minnesota has it. It's we we it's an interesting question, because when you say the biggest, is it the biggest state fair or the best state fair? And those are two different things. And Minnesota actually is the biggest in terms of daily attendance. But we don't run anywhere near as long as the Texas State Fair. In Minnesota, the State Fair lasts 12 days. Um, but I have to say, you guys have more deep fried foods than we do. It was, I think, the first and only time I'll experience deep fried chicken noodle soup. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I think we have a little bit more variety, and I think we also have, the Miracle of Birth Center, which is where you get to go see all the little baby animals, and they're born, and so yeah, we've got a few things going on Texas up here.
Yeah, we're at Blue Water. It seems like most of us are state fair junkies, and always, as an organization, we always put together an afternoon where we all go together, and then I go every year, probably one or two times outside of that too. So it's always fun to hear, especially I've heard about the Minnesota State Fair for a long time. I have some family from
Mhm.
Minnesota, from the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, so they've talked about it, and it's interesting to hear from that perspective because I've never been, but I would love
Well,
to.
I just heard that it's on for this year in a limited
Awesome.
attendance capacity, so it'll be competitive, but
So it
y'all
may
are
not be
welcome.
the biggest this
It
year. We may
not
beat you this year.
right, right, right. We'll see how it
and I
goes.
and I kind of feel like I mean, biggest is nice, and Texas kind of has the sort of the
The big thing.
nationwide. Yeah, we're the biggest of everything. I'd almost kind of rather be the best than the biggest,
Well,
but I'm not sure what the criteria would be there. If it comes to fried foods, I don't know, but
you
we'll
might
have to
have
see.
it. You might have it. Yep, yep.
Yeah,
But
I'd say
I'll have
with
to say we're both up there. It's 1 and 2, flips
yeah,
back and forth, but we're
either
one
It's
way.
and
a tight
Yeah,
two.
race.
Yeah.
I'll say
Lisa,
the
when
fried
does the
foods
state
down
fair
here.
happen?
It starts the second to the last Thursday in August. It changes because it always ends on Labor Day.
Mm.
So depending on where Labor Day falls, you just go back 12 days, and it's a Thursday, and whatever that date is, and that's when the state fair is.
So
So I have one big question. Sorry, Timmy, but this could settle it once and for all. Is that mosquito season? Because the mosquitoes in Minnesota are like 747s, and if those things are flying around at the state fair, then it's not the best.
Yeah, no, I think they tend to avoid it. I think they avoid
Okay.
it. Yeah. I haven't had any issues with mosquitoes. I will say there's other parts of Minnesota you don't want to be in August, but um, yeah, state fair. I think there's so many people that we crowd them out.
Right. Yeah, they're not interested. That's funny. I would say for me, I love the state fair, the fried foods, but it's gotten a little out of hand in Texas. Back in the day, it was just fried
Oreo.
corny dogs and fried Oreos and maybe a fried Snickers. now we've got deep fried beer and deep fried butter and deep fried who knows what else. It's like they're just throwing whatever they could think of in the deep fryer and
Chicken noodle soup. That was
seeing
a
what
good
comes
one.
out. So
Yeah.
they've gotten a little out of control, but it's always kind of funny to see what the new things are and if they
Mhm.
even sound remotely interesting at all. So that being said, Lisa, appreciate the fun discussion around state fairs because it really kind of helps lead into kind of our engagement and just overall
Mhm.
what you're tasked with at 3M and just kind of providing a great experience for learners and customers and just making sure that they're taken care of. So tell us about I was going to kind of first off deep dive into how do you approach learning and development for such a large audience? Who are you
Mhm.
trying to really um, you know make sure is compliant or make sure is training
Yeah.
and learning and what is the tool or what kind of processes do you use to make sure you're providing a consistent and engaging process for that large audience?
Mhm. So today, my focus is primarily internal. So education and training is taking place with 3M colleagues around the world. Um, in my previous role, when I was working closely with Blue Water and learning management systems, was an external focus. So looking at, what do our customers need? How do we engage customers as part of, certainly as part of a compliance and education and training, but also, there's a marketing component in there. And how are we engaging our customers? Is it easy to find things? Is it a good experience? So a lot of emphasis on the user experience, the interface. And I would say that internally, and the approach this last 2 years with compliance really borrows from that, or it's not that different in terms of looking at an internal customer and what is it that motivates them to learn. And certainly when you talk about this last year, and I expect we'll talk a lot about, the differences in this last year and who could have anticipated this, and relying on really hoping that people have an intrinsic kind of internal motivation to learn and to approach training and education, because we're not doing that face to face. We're not I'm not flying to China, I'm not flying to Europe
Hmm.
or South America and engaging with the team and saying, what works, what doesn't work, and driving motivation from kind of that external or extrinsic you know what I mean, perspective. So um, I think we've had to be more creative, definitely, more flexible, and a little bit more innovative in terms of really the instructional design, in thinking about how we want to deliver content, what is going to engage people, how long do they want to stay on a computer, or
Right.
on a desktop or a laptop or a phone or anything. And you and I, we all have experienced this. At the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is spend an hour doing online training because you're tired of being online all day.
Mhm.
And so there's a number of different factors that come into, and I will say I don't know that we've found um, the perfect intersection of those things. I think we're still learning. Um, but I don't think that learning is going to stop as we come out of the pandemic, and people have changed so much in terms of what motivates them, how they like to approach work, how they like to approach education and training. And I think we'll also see the after effects of that. And I think that will continue to change and challenge us in terms of being innovative, not so much with our systems, with our technology, as it is with how do we use that technology.
Hey, Lisa,
So
I just have
yeah,
a quick. Oh, sorry, Bennett, if I might, I just have a quick follow up there. If that's okay. Just so you said that you've been able to innovate and some things have worked. Like, I'm just curious whether it worked or not. what have you tried, and what seems to be the one or two or three things that you believe are working that have now become staples?
Mhm. So one of the things that I think is working is looking at content in smaller chunks. So that micro content, bits and pieces. Like let's not bite off this whole section or this whole chapter of the book. Let's take a couple pages of the book or the couple pages of the chapter and see what we can do with that and make it short, make it funny, make it interactive if you can. um, and really moving away from these, we're going to do a 45-minute webinar, or you're going to sit and flip through pages and take quizzes. Those things, we still have those. Um, but I think we have to make it short and sweet and engaging. So that I think has been one thing that works. The other thing that I'm just realizing is we tend to, and 3M is a global organization. So we have employees from all over the world, and a lot of those employees that are taking this training speak English, but English is not their first language. So being, I think, a little bit more mindful about what language can we put this in, and really having a lot of our content translated. This year we translated a ton of our content, so that it's a little bit easier, it's a little bit more personalized, um, and we're not expecting people to go above and beyond as much as I think we have in the past.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, what you were saying before and just then, even before the pandemic, it's learning is always like you said, changing. It's always trial and error. I
Hmm.
think, and even this last 12 months have been more trial than error than ever, and kind of figuring out what your learners are doing and how they're responding and how you can adjust on the fly. But I think that's the great and challenging thing about this industry, and this focus is how trends and generations and technology is changing so fast that training is always going to be a necessity, but it's
Hmm.
not really sure in 6 months or 12 months if what you're doing now will be relevant. And it kind
Exactly.
of keeps you on your toes. And then throw a pandemic in that, where everyone goes from being out and about to not, in a span of probably what 2 or 3 days, essentially
Right.
across the globe. And just can't imagine the challenges that, or at least the complexities that threw into um, your
Well,
scope of learning.
yeah, and I think if you sit back and reflect on how we work, just basically how we work has changed. And
Uh-huh.
so when you say, the way that we work, moving from kind of this um, synchronous, way of being in the office at the same time and doing the work at the same time, to this really, and we just talked about this morning at 3M within our group, as um, kind of the difference between synchronous work and asynchronous. And we talk about that in education a lot, but it's really turning into the way we work. And so if we're working with a much more flexible, which I think is fantastic. I mean, it
Hmm.
took a pandemic to um, get us thinking a little bit more, what's the opportunity in the challenge. um, but as we do those things, then how do we model and shape our education and training around the changing way that people just work and approach work?
So I have a question for you. We've talked about on our podcast and some of our webinars about the shift, right? And
Hmm.
especially moving from classroom into online learning in different ways. You talked about, you guys have worked through that. You've also put a big focus on translating languages. What do you think is going to come back? Like, what are the things that when we're all able to move around and be face to face and operate without a pandemic to worry about,
Yeah.
What do you think is going to come back? Do you think classroom training is going to be a thing, or do you think we're going to continue to move in this, micro learning, chunk it up, take it when you can kind of environment?
Yeah. And this is me, I think that um, there will be face-to-face, training and education that will evolve into a hybrid model, which is, and again, I'm a big believer if you look at K-12 education,
Hmm.
there's a lot of things going on there that, are very, very similar and they're in the same place. I talk to my kids are out of school, but I talk to friends that have kids in school and they'll have one. In fact, my two nieces, one of them goes to school because she wants to, and the other one stays at home and does online learning because they have that choice,
Hmm.
um, which I think is also fantastic. And we're talking about that at work. As 3Mers, we'll have opportunity to go back to work. I don't know that it'll ever be 5 days a week full time. I don't know. But if you really want to stay home and you can do that and work that out, I think that's going to be more available. So again, if you look at what are the trends, and then you kind of lay that over onto training and education, a lot of similarities. But
So
I don't think it'll ever go back to. I don't
I
think any of us do. I don't think any of us think, people talking about going back to normal, and it's like,
there is no
Yeah,
normal. We're
no,
doesn't
moving into
exist.
a new phase. It's different, and it's
right.
figuring out what it is. I
And
think.
we've discovered what we can do. I mean, we've discovered what we're capable of.
Right, that's what I was gonna say is a lot of eyes have been open to, "Hey, you know what? We can work flexible schedules and still maintain productivity or get our work done." Same thing with training. Just because I'm not in a classroom doesn't mean I'm not getting my training complete or I'm not taking care of my compliance requirements. I'm just doing it in a different way at a different time.
Yeah,
It's also a different way for business leaders to manage it, right? It's
right,
different when
right.
you're managing a lot of heavy classroom training. Now you kind of have both. Maybe I'm picturing, and I could be wrong. It's just my own personal opinion. I expect to see kind of both, right? What you were explaining about, K through 12 right now. Am I in
Right.
classroom or not? I think there's still that need for humans to connect without it being behind a
Right, right.
but
And
there's a way to do that that it's not the same as it always was before, and it'll be, I think, those classroom engagements will likely be a little more innovative.
mhm,
May even be leveraging the content that would otherwise be available e-learning, but within the classroom. So I appreciate your take on kind of you see kind of maybe there's going to be a
mhm.
flexible approaches to how you complete your training, your learning, your education within the organization.
And I think I was thinking about this a little bit more earlier today about, the different types of learners. I'm a pretty visual learner, which is fine. I can still learn visually watching, and watching a screen, or auditory, you're still hearing things, and what is it, reading, writing,
Mhm,
and then kinesthetics. So like that's where I think, if you're very much a hands-on learner,
mhm,
that is going to require some creativity. And there's certainly areas, I mean, I'm in the healthcare business, so there's certainly places within healthcare where you really have to have that hands-on interactive training. Um, and so, yeah, there will be that, but I agree. I think it'll look different.
Definitely. I think it's very interesting to see, like you had mentioned, just that when we do go back to what won't be normal, looking back from 2019, but going forward, it'll be our new normal, is the idea of the hybrid model.
Hmm.
So, we'll get back to some kind of normalcy that we feel like was before the pandemic for some people, but then there's other people out there that will leverage technology or different ways of doing things that will get the same experience, but from home or from a virtual location.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think there will still be people that pick up their groceries curbside from forever now. but there's going to be a
Exactly.
lot of people that still go to the grocery store and want to walk through the aisles. So
Right. You know what? They want to touch the apple before they,
yep,
it's
Yeah.
like,
yeah. So
I want to
technology
pick
isn't
up the avocado before I put it in my cart,
absolutely. Technology has enabled us to do some really unique things that are going to impact us forever through this pandemic. But that there's definitely the audience that will want to get on a plane and go to a classroom session, in the future when they can, and want to sit through that because of that experience of being connected with people and being
Yeah.
face to face. So how do
And
you
isn't,
kind of
go ahead,
go
I'm
ahead?
sorry.
I was just going to
Oh,
say, how does 3M kind of plan for that?
mhm.
Is there a plan, or is that already happening? Is
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. So some of that is already happening. And we talk about it particularly, working now with our key opinion leaders and our healthcare professionals. It's been kind of it, this past year has been a quiet year, so to speak, which was good. We had some new technology to implement, and
Hmm.
we often talk about how, had we been full scale with education events and contracts, that it would have been a very difficult year in terms of standing up a new system and keeping one foot in that and one foot in the day-to-day operations. We really had a reprieve and time to look at the system development and implementation. And now, actually, in China and a few other places, and here in the U.S., I mean, people are starting to travel. We're starting to see that start to come back. Um, and I think what I was going to say is, isn't it a good thing though? I mean, I look forward to the opportunity for human interaction, for face-to-face interaction. And I think, once again, you look at, the K-12 world and how they talk about, the importance and now of social engagement and social interaction for all these kids who are, starting to feel depressed and
Mhm.
removed from others. And I'm like, that's no different to me than work. It's,
Agree.
I'm a very very extroverted person. I get a lot of my energy from other people, and so it's difficult to stay home sometimes every day for this amount of time. I'd like to go back into the office. I'd like to go to a conference or an event and get back to that engagement. I'd love to go back to the state fair.
Hmm.
Come
Exactly.
on.
And inviting Blue Water to
And
go with you.
inviting Blue Water to
Yeah.
come too. Yeah.
So, or no, not Blue Water, just Bennett, Tiffany, and Dave to come with you to
Okay.
the state
There you
fair.
go.
Let's
Yeah.
just be
It's a
let's
date.
be specific.
But
So,
I mean, we talk about um the way, how to, and we've all talked about this for a long time, all the different types of learners and how people approach learning and everything. And I think if you are a more of a kinesthetic learner, and it's got to be a really hard year.
mhm.
Most
Yeah,
definitely.
and I think, like, businesses have to make decisions about what training is so critical that the way to learn it is best done live.
Yeah.
And we've had to do things other ways, but, like, I kind of want my surgeon, like, preparing to do my surgery not virtually, right? Like, I
Right,
want I
right,
want him,
right,
whatever that way is. And so I think it's like some of those things. Like, we have some airline clients, for example, that you can't show as a flight attendant that you can lift the door and open the chute and slide down it unless
right,
you're in a room and open, and you can't really simulate that in a
right,
room. But
right.
we do have one client that actually did a CPR class virtually, and they
I was
actually
just thinking
shipped,
about that today. Yeah.
yeah, they shipped dolls to everyone who signed up, and then already had, like, a self-labeled box to send it back, kind of
Yeah.
like Amazon stuff, and it was really simple to do. But everyone had their own doll on the camera virtually, and
Uh-huh.
the instructor was on and could see them doing their thing, and I thought that was pretty creative because that's something normally that you would think is in person. We've had some people
Sure.
do happy hours, and they've actually pre-shipped wine and wine glasses to the
I went
people
to a
attending.
fundraiser event that did that.
Yeah.
But, our
So
oral care this was even pre-pandemic. Our oral care business had, for the dentist, I believe it was the orthodontist, don't I'm not the expert on this, but I know they did that where there was a box of, the materials and what you needed, and they shipped those out ahead of time so that, the I gosh, I don't remember if it was dentist or orthodontist, but it was an oral care practitioner that would have that content ahead of time.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think this has given us an opportunity to think a little bit differently, and probably, kind of back to what are the things we're doing different is in some ways we're making learning a little bit more individualized. We're recognizing that not everybody learns the same way.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the things that we talked about before, and that I wanted to bring up is kind of related to that, is around you had mentioned that for a while there you were kind of looking for that one-stop shop, that single
Oh yeah.
place for learning. And now, as we've gone through the last 12 months, or probably even before that, and like you said, individualizing learning, and I know a big buzzword right now is the learning ecosystem, and really
Hmm.
finding the right tools that can plug into your existing kind of mainframe, if you will, and looking at how different tools and technologies can support that individualized learning. So, has your group been able to take advantage of kind of finding some different technologies out there that support the individualized learning and just the different ways you're doing things, but also really work well with your main LMS technology?
Yeah, sure. So, stepping back and this goes back, when I first came to 3M 7 years ago, the big initiative, the goal was we're going to stand up a LMS. It's going to be global. It's going to meet the
Hmm.
needs of the healthcare business. Well, and 3M is much bigger than a healthcare business. We have industrial um, and consumer and safety. And so all of these other businesses, were going to go on the system too. So then it turned into it's not just all of healthcare in 80 different countries, it's all of 3M in 80 different countries. And, it was, it was when you want to standardize at that scale and that scope, it's a very, very difficult thing to do because it's almost like a race to the bottom. It's like, well, what's the bare minimum that will support all of these requirements? And I think what we found out is that it was very, very difficult to meet the needs of our customers um, by doing by doing one approach and one global standard system. Now, not to say that LMS isn't useful in some cases in some areas, but it
Hmm.
became and Dave and Chris and I actually talked about the ecosystem when I went down to Blue Water, and they really kind of introduced me to this concept of the learning, the systems ecosystem, and where were we going to connect, and so from there, we really took off and started looking at what are some of the other plugins and things that we could do that complemented that learning management system. What did apps look like? What did content management systems look like? And how do we build that ecosystem? And that's a work in progress. I mean, it's not going to stop. It's like, you mentioned, I think things change all the time with education and learning and training, and we change products and we change customers or we gain customers. And so it's just got to be so much more flexible than one rigid standard. So that was I think, a big learning. And as I shifted over into our compliance, our end-to-end engagement system, which isn't it's not a customer facing or external facing platform, but it's very much a system that's implemented front to back and standardized across the business and around the globe. And once again, trying to standardize that and make it one solution is very, very difficult to do because there's different laws, there's different rules, there's different contracts. And so I think there's a place. What I didn't mention is 3M also has, I worked with Dave on our customer facing solutions. We also have internal solutions for 3M, and we have multiple solutions depending on what the content is. A lot of our content right now in 3M is spending a lot of time on diversity and inclusion, like many organizations.
Hmm.
You know, what do we do around diversity and inclusion? What are we doing around sustainability? How are we educating and engaging our employees? And as some of our social values and our community values change, um, our content is changing too. Um, and so it's a really interesting time.
So,
It is.
Lisa, I'm kind of intrigued by what you said about this sort of give and take in trying to centralize in the race to the bottom, so to speak.
Yeah.
I love that phrase. It was great. If you had a room full of 20 other business leaders who were looking at centralizing versus remaining decentralized, like what advice would you give them? What learns are there? What tips or things that you think might help them to consider as they try to think about, is it worth the journey? What are the things that we might not know that we don't know? Those kinds of things.
Um, Great question. I think what I would say is, I mean, we all want to drive efficiencies, and economies of scale, and having one LMS and everybody using it the same way. Um, but I think it has a lot to do with understanding where your customers are coming from and what your customer expectations are. Um, and I would say, you want to err on the side of what's going to meet the needs of your customers. Um, but you want to balance that with what's going to be efficient and effective, easy to use on the inside, because you don't want something that's so complex that your users, your employees, your teams can't use it. Um, but when you try to push a standard to the extent that I think we originally had hoped to, you lose the flexibility with your customers. And for an organization like 3M, and we're a little bit unique in the sense of how many different industries we're in. But if you're driving training around um, automotive aftermarket products and services and dental and orthodontia, you're dealing with very different learners, very different schedules, time, you know approaches to learning, and you have to be able to deliver that. And I think it's a balance with um, driving a global standard. um, Not to mention again, the language barriers, and just the different way, we learn so differently from each other just in the US alone. And then you compound that and add a global approach to it. And it's a hard thing to do, to standardize. I think you just have to be flexible. um, and again, we talk about innovation all the time. So partnering with different people. I think one of the things you introduced us to, Dave, was, different people that can plug in different holes or gaps that we saw in organizations that were maybe smaller and a little bit more flexible and innovative and had some really great ideas. I mean, there's some of those organizations that we met through Blue Water, 4 years ago, we're still working with at 3M. So
So it sounds like when it comes to the idea of standardization is if you have a large, complex, wide-reaching organization, it's probably unlikely that one size will fit all. Work to standardize where you can, but be flexible to still meet the needs of your customers and even whatever the requirements are for your various locations and in markets.
Yeah, a much more succinct way of saying what I was just
Yeah,
verbalizing, but,
it's so great
you
because
know
I can't tell you how many times we've started an engagement with a client and they're like, we want one standard. And then you get to talking to the client and to their different parts of the business. And it quickly becomes apparent that one standard won't work for everybody because the business itself is just too different. Me and my husband will never wear the same size shoes. So one pair of shoes is never going to be enough. Right.
Right. Good
So,
analogy. Yeah, yeah.
right.
And, I think we tried really hard, but it was mostly kind of like, what do you have to give up? What do you have to give up? What do you have to give up? And for healthcare, we were a little bit ahead of the rest of the organization. And it's like, no, we don't want to give this up. We don't want to give this up. Like, this is important to our customers. And I think as 3M, we got caught up too in this notion that we wanted to, and it's important. It's a good thing to drive messaging around the brand and drive the brand, um, but our brand is even different to different markets. And when you talk about the 3M brand in healthcare, it's much different than when you're talking about the 3M brand in construction. People identify with different products and different services, so it's hard to say, well, we're going to deliver all of the education on those in different in the same way, because they are very different.
Right. So in your
It's
process, oh, sorry, Dave.
no, go ahead.
I'm still gonna go right through that. um, in your process to standardize, obviously you guys found that one size won't fit all, but did you guys find efficiencies? Even as you were bringing your different business partners or businesses through that process, did you guys find efficiencies and really improve or streamline in
Oh
areas?
yeah, yeah. I think you know one of the one of the interesting things that happens, and you guys will appreciate this, and I think it goes a lot to kind of you know your place in the market, is there's systems, and you can look at how do we best use system A to get from point A to point, from A to Z.
Mhm.
um, but there's a whole lot of human process that happens in between that. And so things like well, even within design thinking now, there's ecosystem thinking and journey mapping and things like that. And I think that's what really helped us, was to sit back and say, people want to jump into, what is the system going to do to fix our process? And right now where I'm at, people are like, well, what is the system going to do? And I'm like, the system can do what you need it to do. You need to tell me what the process is.
Mhm.
and I think that's what happened for us, was understanding that you don't look you don't really look to technology to solve a systems process, or I mean a process issue. I mean, if you have a business process and it's not working, don't throw a don't throw a system at it, because it's not, um, until you examine the process and the end to end and the gaps and what you want, you'll never know what system you want, and what will work for you. Did that make sense?
100%.
Totally, yeah.
I was gonna say, I think once upon a time we may have had a motto or something around here about how licenses don't solve business problems. So just buying the piece of technology isn't going to solve the problem. It's usually there's a process wrapped around it. It's got to be evaluated. The
Yeah,
technology is going to do whatever you want it to. I mean, really, that's how flexible technology is now. Whatever you need it to do, it'll do. But you've got to really sit back and talk about what do you really need it to do? What's the objective? And how does that operate within your business? And I feel like a lot of people like
right.
straight into technology, and there's a whole business layer before you ever get there.
Yeah. It's like right now is, when can we get this system launched so that we're compliant? And
Mm.
it's like, well, the system isn't going to make us compliant. The business process is going to make us compliant. And um and it's true with education and training too. It's like the system isn't going to do it. And I think that is, to answer your question, what drove efficiencies for 3M and what was the learning is, that we had to understand, and this is still really hard to do, to get people to stop and take time to do things like journey mapping and design thinking and ecosystem and interviewing and engaging all the users. And, nobody wants to go that slow.
Mhm.
And, but when you do it, and again, if I was sitting with a bunch of other, learning or executive colleagues, I would say that it is the best time spent is to sit down and say, let's map out our end-to-end journey. Let's look where the gaps are. Let's understand that, and then let's go look for a system that's gonna help us eliminate those gaps and eliminate those challenges.
Absolutely. I think those words are, we speak those words all the time to prospective and current and former clients, and I think that's always the key thing. No matter what kind of organization you are, if you're 3M and global, and really doing pretty much manufacturing just about everything you can think of, or just a small organization looking for their
Yes.
first learning management system. It's all about documenting and understanding business process, what's driving that, where the gaps are, and then the technology is just going to help define that, or support that. But it's not going to fix it or change it unless there's really true thought behind
Yeah.
what your
And I
users
think
need. And
I'm smiling, and I think maybe Dave's, I can't tell with that new beard, but if I think Dave's smiling a little is, I think I just sounded an awful lot like you when you came and visited several years ago. And I'm like, oh, I learned something, didn't I?
I think we all kind of learned, and as things kind of evolve, that quote ecosystem unquote, the pendulum swings back and forth. And I think when we first met, most companies were looking for a one-stop shop. They really
Mhm.
were focused on one thing that could do it all. And before that, 5 years before that, people were looking at the best of breed and how to integrate them. And now I think it's kind of combining those two things. Like I do want to
Mhm.
find the right system to do the things, but I'm not naive enough to think that one's going to do it all. And so I want to make sure that I've defined my business so that I can figure out the right ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so I think you helped us learn, and we helped you learn as well. And I think we're coming to that right place from a business perspective that says we want to look at what we have today and get the most use out of it. But if optimizing what we have isn't enough and there's still these
Mhm.
gaps, first of all, based on your words, that doesn't meet our customers, and then secondly, might also not meet our own ability to manage and support, then we might have to look at a new technology. And
Mhm.
I think that gives us criteria for the evaluation that we might not have had before.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah.
well, Lisa, we really appreciate your time, and really diving into the complexities and challenges that and successes that you and your teams have had over the years, and especially over the last 12 months or so, with the changing world that we've been living in and living through. It's amazing what, like I said, what 3M does. One of my favorite things about 3M, a friend of mine is a rep on the paint supplies for 3M.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and one of the things he always says, and you probably know this exactly, I can't remember if it's 3 feet or 6 feet, but he's like, no matter who you are or where you are, you're always within 6 feet, I think, of a 3M
I've
product.
I've always heard 7. It
Okay,
might be
seven
6
feet.
now. It
Yeah.
might be 3. I don't know.
It's less than 10
We're
feet
getting
away
We've
from a
closer.
we've
3M
made some
Yeah.
product.
acquisitions, so it's probably
Okay.
down to 6.
You're working your way down. Yeah.
But
Which is just
it's true. It's true.
it's just amazing to me. Yeah.
I tell people, if you have a cell phone, it's in there. If you have
Uh-huh.
dental work in your mouth, it's probably in there,
Hmm.
It's yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is, and I
That's pretty
remember
cool.
once we started working with you all several years ago. I do this with all kind of Blue Water clients. Once I see the name, I'm recognizing, oh yeah, that cool, they're a Blue Water client, and then I start seeing that logo all over the place.
Yeah.
And then with 3M, I was like, oh my gosh, there's the 3M logo like everywhere I look in my garage, or whatever it is. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
really it's really great to be able to talk with you today and kind of hear your perspective, especially in the healthcare side of 3M and what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fun discussion, and I could probably talk about it the rest of the day, but we've got more innovating to do, right?
Right.
Exactly, that's right. So one thing I wanted to ask, just as a fun way to kind of close it down, is so we've been talking a lot about the pandemic and
Hmm.
quarantine and being at home. From all of us, and I'll start because puzzling is what I've been doing. But I was going to ask, what specific quarantine hobby or kind of thing to get away have you picked up or continued or been doing? Because I never did puzzles. I never liked puzzles, but all of a sudden I do. I'm always got a
Oh yeah.
puzzle on my kitchen table, and I'm working through a puzzle. It's kind of what I did over the 12 months of being around. So what fun things have you kind of picked up or continued to do during the
Um,
last 12 months?
well, a big thing for me is, let's see, about 12 months ago, I sold my house, and I started the process of building a new house, and I moved in February. So I
Wow.
built a house, not me personally, but built a new house. So that was a diversion, of which I'm extremely fortunate and grateful for. The other, though, more to your point, I think, is reading. And I was going to talk about that in terms of how we learn. It's like I'm reading so much more. I'm just like, I joined a book club, so
Hmm.
reading for pleasure, reading for, education and learning, but reading.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting the different things that people find when they have time on their hands that they find they like to do that they haven't done in a long time, or a new skill or hobby they pick up. What about you, Tiffany? What is one thing that you started doing?
Well, I'm introverted, so this whole staying at home was a thing I liked to do before the pandemic happened. So, I'm a gardener. I love
Mm,
to grow plants and vegetables and my roses. So, I've obviously had much more time with no travel and all of that, but I'm in the garden all the time. My
nice.
goats, of course.
Dave, other than growing your beard, what have you what have you picked up on?
Mm.
Yeah, that's probably the primary thing, and all the things that you can't see that I just kind of keep up in there as I need them. I just
Uh-huh.
put
Yeah,
it out.
what's living in there?
Yeah, you have
I thought
no.
I
I don't even
saw a
know it.
bird
So
beak poking out through the bottom there a
yeah,
little bit ago.
sometimes I pull out like there's the pen comes out there in case I need it, and all
Ah,
kinds of things. Um, so we used to it actually look pretty good on video. um,
It did. I
we
was
we
impressed.
we we went and binge watched all kinds of TV
oh,
shows, and
sure.
then my wife said we got to stop. We're watching way too much TV. So we got into looking for games, and so we
Mhm.
found some pretty unique games, some of which were long, complex, couple of days it would take you to finish, or weeks to finish, kind of things, and also just some unique two-player games that we play that we like that I probably would have never saw before. So that was kind of fun for us to start a little game collection.
Very
All
cool.
right.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Lisa.
Sure.
And thanks for our listeners today. If you are enjoying what you're hearing or want to know more, feel free to check out our website, bluewaterlearning.com, or reach out to us directly. If you liked what you heard today, feel free to leave a comment, subscribe anywhere you're finding the podcast, on Google or Apple or Spotify or any other places there. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, feel free to please like and subscribe and comment and leave us any suggestions for what you want to hear in the future, or any questions you may have from our discussion today. We're always here to help, and always looking to dive deeper into learning and talent technology and process and what's going on out there and at 3M and everywhere else. So Lisa, thanks again. Dave,
Yeah,
Tiffany,
thanks for
as
having me.
always.
Thanks.
We,
Good to see you
look
again, Lisa.
forward to
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. We look forward to having a follow up maybe in a year or so, or hopefully before that.
Sure, yeah.
About
That'd be fun.
what's happened in the last 12 months, and also how our time was at the Minnesota State Fair.
State
State
Fair.
Fair, yeah.
You got it.
All right.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.